Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've never told this story to anyone except the police, and even then, I don't think they believed me. My name is Sarah, and what happened to me 3 months ago in my family's laundromat in Detroit still keeps me awake at night. I'm sharing this now because I need people to know that some encounters, they change you forever. My dad owns a 24-hour coin laundromat on Jefferson Avenue. It's not the best neighborhood, but it's been our family's livelihood for 12 years. When I started college, I offered to work the overnight shifts to help out and earn some spending money. The pay was decent, and usually the worst thing I had to deal with was drunk people stumbling in or the occasional homeless person trying to sleep in the warm building. That night, March 15th, a massive thunderstorm hit Detroit around midnight, the kind of storm that makes you grateful to be indoors. Rain was pounding the windows so hard it sounded like someone throwing handfuls of gravel against the glass. The power had gone out to half the block, but our laundromat stayed lit thanks to Dad's backup generator system. By 2:47 a.m., I had only one customer, an elderly black man named Mr. Henderson who came in every few weeks. He'd been there since about 11 p.m., quietly reading a paperback novel while his clothes tumbled in the ancient Maytag washer in the corner. The fluorescent lights above him flickered occasionally when thunder rolled overhead, casting strange shadows across his weathered face. The storm was getting worse. Water was pooling in the parking lot, and I could see Jefferson Avenue flooding near the storm drains. That's when she walked in. I heard the door chime over the sound of rain and looked up to see a woman entering during what had to be the worst part of the storm. She was completely soaking wet, her dark hair plastered to her skull, expensive-looking black coat dripping water all over my freshly mopped floor. But here's the thing that immediately struck me as odd. She had no umbrella, no hood up, nothing to suggest she'd even tried to protect herself from the downpour outside. She looked to be in her 30s, pale skin, wearing what seemed like designer clothes underneath that coat. But something about her outfit felt wrong. Like it was too perfect, too coordinated for someone who'd just run through a thunderstorm in the middle of the night. Without saying a word, she walked directly to one of the orange plastic chairs near the front window and sat down. She didn't approach the change machine, didn't look at the washers or dryers. She just sat there, staring directly at me behind the counter. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. "Hi there," I called out, trying to sound friendly despite the weird vibes she was giving off. "Terrible night to be out, huh? You need change for the machines." She didn't respond, just kept staring with these dark, unblinking eyes. Mr. Henderson glanced up from his book, looked at the woman, then at me. I saw something flicker across his face. Not confusion, but genuine discomfort. He quickly gathered his things, abandoned his clothes mid-cycle, and headed for the door. "Mr. Henderson, your wash isn't done," I called after him. He paused at the door, rainwater streaming down the glass behind him. "I'll come back tomorrow, baby girl. You be careful tonight." And then he was gone, disappearing into the storm. Now it was just me and this strange woman. That's when I noticed her shoes. Black heels, expensive-looking leather, completely dry. Not a drop of water on them, despite the fact that she'd supposedly just walked through a biblical-level thunderstorm. The hair on the back of my neck started to stand up. "Can I help you with something?" I asked again, my voice a little shakier this time. This time, she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, showing too many teeth. "You work here every night." Her voice was soft, almost melodic, but there was something underneath it that made my skin crawl. "Not every night," I lied instinctively, "but Tuesday through Saturday, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. "Right, Sarah." My blood ran cold. I'd never told her my name. It wasn't on a name tag. Dad never bothered with those for the night shift. "How do you know my name?" She tilted her head to one side like a curious animal. "Do you live alone in that apartment on Cass Avenue? Third floor, corner unit with the blue curtains?" I felt like I was going to throw up. She was describing my apartment perfectly. Details only someone who'd been watching would know. My hand moved toward the phone behind the counter. "I think you should leave." "What time do you get off work?" she continued, completely ignoring my request. "I know you drive that little Honda Civic. Light blue. License plate ends in 847. I grabbed the phone to call my dad, but the line was dead. The storm must have knocked out the phone lines. My cell phone was in my purse in the back office, but that would mean turning my back on her, and every instinct I had was screaming not to do that. Lightning flashed outside, and for a split second, the security camera monitors behind me filled with static. When they cleared, I looked back at the woman. She was closer now, standing right in front of the counter. I hadn't heard her move. "I know you, Sarah," she said, her voice now barely above a whisper. "I've been getting to know you, watching you through your bedroom window at night. You sleep on your left side. You keep a glass of water on the nightstand. Sometimes you talk in your sleep." The room felt like it was spinning. This woman had been stalking me, watching me in my most private moments, and I'd had no idea. "Stay back," I managed to say, but my voice came out as barely more than a squeak. "You have such beautiful skin," she continued, moving around the counter now. "So young, so soft. I've been wondering what it would feel like." I ran toward the back office, slamming the door behind me and fumbling for the lock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. I grabbed my cell phone from my purse, but there was no signal, probably due to the storm. That's when I heard her voice, but it was coming from inside the office with me. "There's no point in hiding, Sarah." I spun around, but the small office was empty. Just the desk, filing cabinet, and the small security monitor showing the main floor of the laundromat. The monitor showed the woman still standing by the counter, but I could hear her breathing right behind me. "I've been in your apartment, you know," the voice whispered in my ear. "I know where you keep your spare key. I know what kind of shampoo you use. I know the sound you make when you're scared." Lightning crashed outside, followed immediately by the loudest thunder I'd ever heard. Every light in the building went out simultaneously, plunging me into absolute darkness. The backup generator had finally failed. In the darkness, I heard her voice coming from everywhere at once. From my left, my right, above me, below me. Multiple versions of her voice, speaking in perfect unison. "You can't hide from me, Sarah. I know everything about you. I've been inside your dreams." I was sobbing now, pressing myself against the back wall of the office, feeling around desperately for something, anything, to defend myself with. My hands found Dad's old baseball bat that he kept behind the filing cabinet. Emergency lighting suddenly kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. I cautiously opened the office door and peered out into the main floor of the laundromat. She was gone. The orange plastic chair where she'd been sitting was bone dry, despite the puddle of water I'd seen her leave there earlier. I crept out slowly, bat raised, checking behind every washer and dryer. The front door was still locked from the inside, the same way I'd locked it after Mr. Henderson left. That's when I heard someone pounding on the front door. "Police, open up!" I ran to the door and saw 2 Detroit PD officers standing in the rain. One of them was shouting through the glass, "Ma'am, we got a call about screaming. Are you all right?" I unlocked the door and they rushed in, water streaming from their rain gear. "There was a woman," I gasped. "She was stalking me. She knew where I lived. She knew my name." They searched the entire building, every corner, every hiding place. Nothing. They reviewed the security footage on the working monitor. The footage showed me arriving for my shift, Mr. Henderson doing his laundry, Then Mr. Henderson leaving. After that, it showed me alone for the rest of the night, talking to empty air, having conversations with no one. At one point, the cameras caught me running to the back office, screaming at nothing. "Miss, are you sure you're feeling all right?" one of the officers asked gently. "Have you been under a lot of stress lately? Getting enough sleep?" I insisted that she was real, that she'd been there, that she'd been stalking me. But the evidence was right there on the security monitors. I'd been alone all night. The officers left around 6 a.m. when the storm finally broke. I called my dad and told him I was sick, that I needed to go home. I never worked another overnight shift at that laundromat. But here's the thing that still terrifies me. 2 weeks later, I found a note slipped under my apartment door. Written in elegant handwriting were the words, "I enjoyed our conversation, Sarah. Sweet dreams." My dad sold the laundromat within a month. He said it was because business was slow, but I know the real reason. I told him everything, and even though he didn't say it, I could see in his eyes that he believed me. I still live in Detroit, but I moved to a different apartment across town. I work day shifts now at a coffee shop downtown, surrounded by people and natural light. But sometimes, late at night when it's raining, I catch a glimpse of a woman in a dark coat standing across the street from my new building, and her shoes are always completely dry. If you're still listening, you probably enjoy stories like this. A like or a comment helps keep them alive. My name is Marcus, and I'm 28 years old. Until 6 weeks ago, I drove for Uber on weekends to make some extra cash. I worked in tech during the week, but Portland rent isn't cheap, and the side hustle helped me save up for a down payment on a house. I'd been driving for about 8 months, mostly safe rides. Drunk college kids, airport runs, the occasional late-night hospital trip. Nothing that ever made me think twice about getting behind the wheel with strangers. That changed on April 7th, during one of the worst storms Portland had seen all spring. I'd been out since about 10 p.m. that Saturday night. The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind of downpour that turns the Willamette Valley into a gray, misty nightmare. Visibility was terrible, but surge pricing was active, and I figured I could make decent money before calling it a night. Most riders were staying in, so the few requests I got were paying nearly triple rate. Around 1:15 a.m., I got a ping from the Marriott downtown in the Pearl District. 5-star rider rating, which was always a good sign. The pickup location showed a well-lit hotel entrance, and the destination was listed as a residential address in southeast Portland, about a 20-minute drive in good weather. I pulled up to the hotel and saw a man in an expensive-looking charcoal suit waiting under the covered entrance. He was probably in his 40s, clean-shaven, carrying a leather briefcase. The kind of guy who looked like he belonged in a downtown hotel at 1 a.m. Business traveler, maybe visiting from out of state. "Marcus?" he asked, approaching my Honda Accord. "That's me. You, David?" "Yes. Thank you for picking me up in this weather." His voice was smooth, professional. He slid into the back seat, and I noticed he smelled like expensive cologne mixed with something else I couldn't quite place. Something chemical and sharp. "No problem," I said, pulling away from the hotel. "Crazy storm tonight. You visiting Portland for business?" "Something like that," he replied. "Actually, I'm here visiting family. My sister lives out in Southeast." I nodded and plugged the destination address into my GPS. That's when I hit the first red flag. The address he'd given me, 4847 Southeast Woodstock Boulevard, wasn't coming up properly in the mapping system. The GPS kept recalculating, showing me 3 different possible locations within a 2-mile radius. "Hey, your address is giving me some trouble," I said, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Do you know any nearby cross streets or landmarks?" That's when I noticed he was staring at me, not looking out the window, not checking his phone, just staring directly at the back of my head with this intense, unblinking focus that made my skin crawl. "Just head southeast," he said. "I'll direct you when we get closer." We drove in silence for about 10 minutes, the rain hammering my windshield and the radio playing soft jazz to fill the awkward quiet. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, David was still watching me. Not in a normal, casual way, but with the kind of focused attention that felt predatory. "Actually, turn left here," he said suddenly as we approached Division Street. I checked my GPS. "Are you sure? The navigation is telling me to keep going straight for another mile. Turn left. Trust me, I know where I'm going." I made the left turn, but now we were heading away from the address he'd originally given me. "So you said you're visiting your sister?" "That's right." "Does she live in this area? Because we're moving away from the address you gave me." There was a pause. "Actually, it's not my sister. It's a business meeting." I felt my stomach tighten. His story was already changing, and we'd only been driving for 15 minutes. A business meeting at 1:30 in the morning? "Turn right at the next intersection," he said, completely ignoring my question. I was starting to get seriously uncomfortable. We were now in an industrial area near the river, nothing but warehouses and empty lots. No residential buildings in sight. The rain was coming down even harder, and the street lights were creating these eerie reflections on the wet pavement that made it hard to see clearly. "Look, David, I think there might be some confusion about the destination. Where exactly are we going?" That's when his voice changed completely. The polite, professional tone disappeared, replaced by something cold and commanding. "You ask a lot of questions, Marcus." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "What did you say?" "I said you ask a lot of questions. About destinations, about family. Just like you asked questions about your girlfriend Jessica when she was walking to work last Tuesday." My blood turned to ice water. I'd never mentioned Jessica to this man. I'd never even mentioned having a girlfriend. And the fact that he knew her name, knew her routine. "How do you know about Jessica?" "Pull over here," he said, pointing to an empty lot between two abandoned warehouses. "I'm not pulling over. I'm taking you back to the hotel." "Pull over, Marcus, or something bad is going to happen to Jessica when she walks home from her job at Powell's Books tomorrow night." I nearly drove off the road. Jessica did work at Powell's. She did walk home most nights. This man knew details about my life that he couldn't possibly know unless he'd been watching us, following us, tracking our movements. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "Pull into that lot. Now." I looked around desperately and realized we weren't alone. There were 3 other cars parked in the shadows of the warehouses, their headlights off, but engines running. I could make out silhouettes of people sitting inside them, waiting. This wasn't a random ride request. This was planned, coordinated. "How long have you been tracking me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while my mind raced through escape, options. "Turn off the engine, Marcus." "Answer my question first." 3 weeks. Ever since you picked up my associate from the airport. We've been studying your routes, your schedule, your personal life. Did you know you drive the same roads to work every morning? Did you know Jessica buys coffee from the same cart on Burnside every Tuesday and Thursday at 8:47 a.m.? I was hyperventilating now. These people had been stalking both of us for weeks, learning our patterns, preparing for... What? What do you want from me? Turn off the engine. Instead, I slammed my foot on the gas pedal. My car lurched forward, tires spinning on the wet asphalt. In the rearview mirror, I saw David thrown back against the seat, shouting something I couldn't make out over the sound of the engine and rain. The other cars immediately roared to life, headlights blazing as they began pursuit. I took a hard right out of the industrial lot, fishtailing on the slick road but managing to keep control. David was screaming at me from the back seat, but I couldn't process what he was saying. All I could focus on was getting away from those headlights in my mirrors. "You're making a mistake, Marcus. You can't run from us forever." I took another sharp turn, this time onto a street I knew was under construction. The city had been tearing up Southeast Powell for months, and most of it was blocked off to regular traffic. If I could get through the construction zone, their cars might not be able to follow. The road was a mess of torn-up asphalt, orange cones, and construction barriers. My Honda bounced and scraped over the uneven surface, but I could see the pursuing headlights falling behind. They were driving larger vehicles that couldn't navigate the obstacle course as easily. "Stop the car," David was screaming now, all pretense of civility gone. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." I kept driving through the construction zone until I reached the other side, then immediately pulled into the first 24-hour gas station I saw. I slammed on the brakes and turned around to face David. The back seat was empty. I checked the door locks, still engaged. I checked the floor, under the seats, everywhere. No sign that anyone had ever been in my car. The only evidence was the lingering smell of that sharp chemical odor. I called the police from the gas station. They took my report seriously, especially when I mentioned the specific threats against Jessica. They sent a patrol car to the industrial area I described, but found nothing. No abandoned cars, no evidence of the coordinated stalking operation I described. When I checked my Uber app later, there was no record of the ride. No pickup from the Marriott, no passenger named David, no payment or rating. According to the app, I'd been offline all night. But here's what really terrifies me. 2 days later, Jessica called me crying from work. Someone had been following her home every night since Saturday. A man in a charcoal suit, always staying just far enough back that she couldn't get a clear look at his face. We both quit our jobs and moved to Seattle the following week. I don't drive rideshare anymore. I don't even like being alone in cars after dark. And sometimes, when it's raining really hard, I still catch glimpses of headlights that seem to be following the same route I'm taking, always staying just far enough back to avoid being seen clearly. I don't usually ask, but if this story is getting under your skin, show it some love. It really helps. My name is Jennifer, and I'm a traveling sales rep for a medical equipment company. I've stayed in more budget motels than I care to count, but what happened to me in Bakersfield, California, on a stormy night in March still makes me check every lock twice before I go to sleep. I was driving north on Highway 99, trying to make it to Fresno before midnight when my car started making this horrible grinding noise. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely see the road, and when my engine finally gave up, I was stranded on a dark stretch of highway with nothing but farmland on both sides. The only light I could see was a flickering neon sign about a quarter-mile ahead. Sunset Motel. Vacancy. The sign buzzed and sparked in the rain, casting an eerie pink glow across the empty parking lot. I grabbed my overnight bag and ran through the downpour, getting soaked to the bone before I reached the office door. The lobby smelled like cigarettes and bleach. Behind the desk sat this elderly man with thick glasses, who kept glancing nervously toward the staircase that led to the second floor. His hands shook slightly as he slid the registration form across the cracked countertop. "Just you tonight?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, signing my name. "How many other guests do you have?" He peered through the rain-streaked window at the parking lot. Besides my dead Honda, there were only 3 other cars scattered across the asphalt. "Not many," he said. "Quiet night." He handed me a physical key attached to a plastic tag. "Room 237, second floor." As I headed toward the stairs, he called out, "Miss?" "You might hear some noise from construction upstairs. Don't worry about it." I looked around. Construction. This late? But when I turned back, he was already retreating into a back room, leaving me alone in the dim lobby. Room 237 was exactly what you'd expect from a $40 a night motel. Faded carpet, a TV from the 1990s, and a bathroom that had seen better decades. I was exhausted, so I didn't care. I just wanted to get a few hours of sleep before dealing with my car in the morning. That's when the sound started. It was around midnight when I first heard it, a slow, deliberate dragging noise from the room directly above mine, like someone was moving heavy furniture across the floor. Scrape, 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 then silence. Then it would start again. I tried to ignore it, but after an hour, I called the front desk. The phone rang and rang with no answer. Finally, I threw on some clothes and went downstairs to complain in person. The lobby was empty, not just unmanned, completely empty. The chair behind the desk was pushed back like someone had left in a hurry. The guest registry was open on the counter, and I could see my name at the bottom of a very short list. Curiosity got the better of me. I flipped back through the pages, looking for room 337, the room above mine. There it was, checked in 6 months ago. The signature was illegible, but in the number of guests column, someone had written "The Family" in red ink. A door slammed somewhere upstairs, and I practically jumped out of my skin. I hurried back to my room, but as I was climbing the stairs, I noticed another guest coming out of room 235, a heavy-set trucker in his 50s wearing a Patriot's cap. "You having trouble sleeping too?" he asked. His name tag read Pete. "The room above mine," I said. "Someone's moving furniture around at midnight." Pete's expression darkened. "Room 337? That room's supposed to be empty. I asked the desk guy about it earlier because I keep seeing lights go on and off up there. He swore to me nobody's been in that room for months." We both looked up at the third floor. Sure enough, a pale yellow light was glowing behind the curtains of room 337, casting shadows that seemed to move back and forth across the window. "Maybe we should call the police," I suggested. Pete shook his head. "Call them about what?" "Strange lights and furniture sounds. They'll think we're crazy." That's when we heard footsteps on the metal staircase leading to the third floor. Heavy boots taking the steps slowly. Pete and I pressed ourselves against the railing, trying to get a look at whoever was climbing up there. The man who appeared was wearing a maintenance uniform, but something about him was off. He was carrying what looked like a toolbox, but it was too light. He held it like it was empty. When he reached the top of the stairs, he walked directly to room 337 and used a key to let himself in. "Excuse me," I called up to him. "Are you fixing something?" The man turned to look down at us. Even in the dim light, I could see his face was completely expressionless. He stared at us for a long moment, then disappeared into the room without saying a word. Pete grabbed my arm. "Something's not right here. That guy didn't have any tools. Real maintenance guys don't work at 2 a.m. with empty toolboxes." The sounds from room 337 changed. Instead of random furniture dragging, they became rhythmic, methodical, like people walking in a circle, over and over. Step, 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 pause. Step, 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 pause. "We need to get out of here," I whispered. But when we got to the parking lot, Pete's truck wouldn't start. He popped the hood and shone his phone's flashlight on the engine. "Someone cut my battery cables," he said, his voice tight with fear. My Honda was still dead, and now I noticed all 4 tires looked flat. In the distance, lightning illuminated the third-floor balcony, and I saw them, at least 4 figures standing at the railing, looking down at us. They were perfectly still, like statues, but I could feel their eyes on us. The storm knocked out the power around 3 a.m. The motel's emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a sickly green glow. The figures on the balcony were clearer now. A man, a woman, 2 children. They hadn't moved from their positions, but somehow they seemed closer. Pete and I barricaded ourselves in his room using the dresser and whatever else we could find. We sat on the bed with our backs against the headboard, listening to those methodical footsteps above us. They never stopped. All night long, that same pattern, step, 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 pause, like they were performing some kind of ritual. When the sun finally came up, the sounds stopped. The parking lot was quiet except for the drip of water from the roof gutters. Pete and I waited until full daylight before we dared to investigate. Room 337's door was unlocked. Inside, we found a room that looked like it hadn't been occupied in years. The carpet was moldy, the wallpaper was peeling, and everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. There were no footprints, no signs that anyone had been there recently. We found the maintenance man in the parking lot, unconscious behind a dumpster. When the paramedics revived him, he had no memory of the previous night. He didn't even remember coming to the motel. The real motel manager showed up around 8 a.m., a middle-aged woman named Carol, who was horrified to hear about our experience. She swore that no one had worked the night desk and that room 337 had been sealed off due to water damage for over a year. "But we have it all on security cameras," I insisted. Carol checked the footage. According to the cameras, Pete and I had checked ourselves in, talking to an empty lobby. The video showed us having entire conversations with no one, gesturing at thin air. When we watched ourselves calling up to the maintenance man on the stairs, the cameras showed us yelling at nothing. The most disturbing part was that the cameras clearly captured the sounds from room 337, that rhythmic stepping, the furniture dragging. But there was never anyone in the room. The sounds were just happening. Carol comped our stay and called us a tow truck. She also mentioned that the motel had a reputation for strange incidents, especially in rooms directly below 337. "We've had 3 other guests report similar experiences in the past year," she said. "All of them stayed in room 237. My car was fixed by noon, and I got out of Bakersfield as fast as I could. But here's what still bothers me. When I got my credit card statement the next month, I was charged for a 3-day stay at the Sunset Motel, not 1 night. According to their records, I'd extended my checkout twice. I never extended anything. I was gone by 1 p.m. If you're still listening to this, you probably enjoy stories that get under your skin. A like or comment really helps keep them alive. Sometimes I wonder who or what was in that room above me. Were they guests who never checked out? Or something else entirely, something that feeds on the fear of travelers stranded in the middle of nowhere? I still travel for work, but I never stay in budget motels anymore. Because now I know that some places aren't just offering you a room for the night. They're offering you something much worse, and the checkout time isn't always up to you.